So Kaufman Hall did their report,
Yeah.
and it was commissioned by the AHA, American Hospital Association, and they essentially created two scenarios, a optimistic and a pessimistic scenario, where essentially health systems in the year that we're currently in, 2021, will lose between 53 billion and 122 billion dollars due to the pandemic, and a lot of that's just due to the changing behaviors of people and how they engage in healthcare. It's interesting to me, and we're going to take a health IT perspective of this because we're not going to talk about the financials. I'll do that later when I have Rob DeMache back on to talk about. But for you and I, from an IT perspective, here's what I'm hearing from CIOs. I'm hearing it's essentially everything's ramping back up, is what I'm hearing. All the projects that were put on hold are starting to ramp back up. The COVID projects are there, as well as, even some new projects are starting to come out, like these mass vaccination events and those kind of things. How are we going to, how are we going to not lose focus going into the time frame that's coming up? One of the things that these losses indicate is that we're going to have to do more with less, and we have just as much, if not more, projects coming our way. What's the best way for IT staff and managers and CIOs to stay focused?
I mean, it's ultimately comes down to governance, right? It comes down to setting priorities and doing a good job of having a process to make sure that you're implementing the things that your partners in the provision of great healthcare to your patients and families, who are doctors and nurses and lab and pharmacists, whoever the case may be. You're not implementing projects for you, you're implementing projects for them. If you have a good governance process, that process should be one that causes them to prioritize and deprioritize projects. Your job then becomes to make sure that you make a coherent argument about the resources that you have or you don't have to not only be able to execute the projects, but run them after they've been deployed, continue to run them well, and do all of that on a relatively simple, relatively modern infrastructure that is secured. And if you can tell that story, you will be successful. And if you can compel your counterparts at the big table to do their part around prioritization, you will be successful. But that sounds really easy. And I have spent years, and I can tell you it is not it's not a simple thing. You've seen it in lots of other places too. But governance is a challenge. Setting priorities at work, somehow our brain works really differently than it does when it comes to setting priorities at home and making decisions about buying a new car, going on vacation, or paying the mortgage, right? We think differently about this at work for some reason, and so we struggle with it. But if you can put the discipline in place and make that machine run, you will be more successful than the other people you're competing against.